At first, they called it a challenge, but now they're deciding that we don't need labels of any kind. And I find that to be perfectly timed because there's a lot of labels that are out of fashion now. Remember Kids in Cages? That was a label the left really liked. Not so much anymore. But before we get to all of that, and I will get back to this piece by Bari Weiss, which I think is phenomenal. I will get to a lot of sound today. We have more sound from Andrew Cuomo that I guess I missed yesterday afternoon. He said there are allegations, and then there are allegations, which is in itself a pretty unbelievable statement. But before we get to any of that, I'm super excited to welcome back Matt Boyle to the program from Breitbart News. Matt, thank you so much for joining the show.
Grace, it is always a pleasure. I love being on with you.
All right, so Matt, you broke a very interesting story, and I just got word that there's actually been a change up in this since you broke it. This is the story of Democrat Congressman Vicente Gonzalez. Can you explain to people what you guys discovered at Breitbart and kind of how this played out?
Yeah, so this is a Democrat congressman who represents a district that has, it's more than a century since its creation in Texas, never gone Republican. So what often happens with a lot of these career politicians who represent these districts is nobody really digs into them, especially if they're not competitive districts. So this guy has been filing his Vicente Gonzalez from Texas. He represents the 15th Congressional District. It was created in 1903, and it's never gone Republican. So over a century of Democrat rule in this one district. This guy's got a bank account with the Bank of China, according to his financial disclosure report. So we went through his financial disclosure reports for the last 3 years, and it turns out that he's got a bank account with the Bank of China. The reason why this is significant is the Bank of China is controlled and owned by the Chinese Communist Party. It's a state-owned enterprise, and they're very public about the fact that they view their mission as implementing Xi Jinping, the Chinese dictator, communist socialist agenda. They are very upfront about it. They state it right on their website that they're a state-owned enterprise and so on and so forth. So why a Democrat congressman would have a bank account with this bank is very interesting. Now, in addition to that, it turns out that this bank account is very lucrative. So according to these financial disclosure reports from 2017, 18, and 19, the congressman's account was worth between $100,000 and $250,000. During each of those years, he reported earning between $2,500 and $5,000 in interest. Now, $2,500, $5,000, that doesn't seem like a lot, but that translates out to about 1 to 5%, somewhere in that range, between 1 and 5% in interest. I really find it hard to believe that anybody out there across the country, even with a really high-paying CD, but especially like a savings or a checking account in an American bank, finding an interest rate at that level. So significant. There's no
Matt, this seems like Hunter Biden levels of interest.
Right. So this is definitely hinky. There's something going on here. And then after we broke the story, the congressman's office came under a lot of pressure from local news outlets down in Texas who pressed him for it. He refuses to do any interviews about it, refuses to be transparent about it. But his spokesman says that he has since closed the account. So that's kind of if there was nothing wrong with what he did here, why is he closing the account and running away from such a high interest paying account? But the broader issue here is that we're seeing Democrats across the board, whether it be Eric Swalwell with Fang Fang, right, or the Hunter Biden and Joe Biden situation, and there's so many more that we're learning more and more about how a ton of these members of Congress, members of the Biden administration, the president himself, Hunter Biden, so on and so forth. Now we know that Vicente Gonzalez follows this long line of Democrats who seem to be compromised by the Chinese Communist Party, and there seems to be serious problems with them in their response to it. They talk tough. They say they want to be tough on China, but then when it actually comes to actual action, it turns out they've got deep financial relationships that compromise their viewpoints on this. And then again, if we look at Vicente Gonzalez's voting record, he voted a number of times to help the CCP on floor votes that were bipartisan against them. This it fits with a larger pattern of problems on that front.
But Matt, they don't just talk tough. In your piece, you mentioned that Gonzalez had signed a letter from the Blue Dog Coalition. Can you tell people what that is? Because this is really where it shines a light on his hypocrisy.
Right. So the Blue Dog Coalition is a group of Democrats in the House of Representatives that claim to be moderate. So I'm firmly of the belief that there's no such thing as a moderate Democrat, but let's take them at their word. They claim they're moderate. So they claim that they are down the middle and are not radical extremist socialists. Okay, so there's a big group of these guys in the House. They claim to be moderate. They wrote this letter at the early days of the pandemic, so in May 2020, saying to the rest of the congressional leadership, to Kevin McCarthy, Nancy Pelosi, Mitch McConnell, Chuck Schumer. And they wrote this letter saying that they want to stand up to the Chinese Communist Party, and they were concerned about China's handling of the coronavirus pandemic and so on and so forth. So they're saying the right stuff, right? So guys like Vicente Gonzalez are saying a lot of the right things. But the content of that letter, it's hard to disagree with much of it. So it is the right thing to say. People were looking for people to stand up to the CCP. But then when you actually look at, again, the guy's actions on his voting record and his personal financial disclosure accounts, we start learning that it turns out he's not doing what he's saying he intends to do. And that's a real problem. And again, this comes on the heels of, again, Eric Swalwell, the Fang situation, the Hunter Biden stuff, right? All those things that came out in the lead up to the election, the Joe Biden stuff, and we're learning more and more about different cabinet members from the Biden administration. Gina Raimondo, the new Secretary of Commerce, for instance, refuses to put Huawei, the Chinese telecom company, on the entities list. Or keep Huawei on the entities list. It was on the entities list, so people understand this. It's a list from the Department of Commerce that basically bans a company from doing business in the United States. And the reason why the Trump administration put Huawei on the entities list is because Huawei is not really a technology company. What it is it's a state-owned enterprise, much like the Bank of China, in China, that's run by the CCP. Designed to try to collect information on the West. And so what they do is they put out their technology, and then it serves as a giant collection tool. We know that Huawei is a very dangerous company. So the Biden administration is empowering the CCP by doing this. Then we're also seeing actions by, for instance, Linda Thomas Greenfield, Biden's ambassador to the United Nations. She gave a speech in 2019 to what's called the Confucius Institute. The Confucius Institute is an effort by the CCP to infiltrate American colleges and universities. She gave a paid speech there where she praised the Belt and Road Initiative. The Belt and Road Initiative is how the CCP has been gaining geopolitical control and power economically over much of the developing world. And so all of these pictures, all of these pieces come together and paint a picture of how the Democrat Party is essentially compromised by the Chinese Communist Party. And we have a real problem in the United States. There needs to be much more expose on this. Frankly, we probably need an American Activities Committee type of a deal, investigation into people across the board in our government, because there are so many of them in the Democrat Party that are on the take from the Chinese Communist Party, are compromised by the Chinese Communist Party, and are a serious threat to our national security across the board in the Biden administration as well as in Congress.
Now, Matt, my last question for you is more vague, but I want to know your thoughts thus far. We're not far into the Joe Biden administration by any stretch, and he seems to be less and less available to the press. He gets up there. He doesn't remember the name of the Secretary of Defense. What are you thinking right now? What is going on behind the scenes of the Biden administration, if you had to guess?
Well, again, we're 50 days into the Biden administration as of tomorrow, I believe, and we haven't had a press conference from President Biden yet. This is the longest a president has gone in modern history without a press conference. It's frankly unacceptable. The entire establishment media should be ashamed of themselves. CNN should hand over their press passes and admit that they are activists. The fact that this is not the front page story in every single media outlet, that Joe Biden is hiding and refusing to do a press conference, is an embarrassment to the institution. The entire White House Correspondents Association should resign in disgrace. Every single one of them should admit that they're not journalists. This is frankly an embarrassment to the institution of journalism. And I put it at the feet of the media. It's CNN's fault. It's NBC's fault. It's ABC's fault. It's CBS's fault. It's the New York Times' fault. It's the Washington Post's fault. It should be the front page story until such time as Joe Biden does a press conference. Non-stop.
Matt,
but the fact that they aren't doing it is an embarrassment.
I always say on this show that I'll have like one rant a day and I never know when it's going to come, and then I'll just start ranting about one thing. And I feel like today I don't need to do that because you just summed it up for exactly how I feel. I keep saying to people, I will never forgive the media for allowing this guy to get this far in, to wheeling him over the finish line. It's embarrassing. And every time they do something that's semi-okay, everyone's like, oh, props to Jake Tapper for asking that question. And I'm just thinking, we should have been asking questions about Hunter Biden, about his bank accounts, and about Joe Biden years ago, let alone now when it's too late.
Too little, too late. They should be embarrassed of themselves. They're all failures. None of them are real journalists. They're all political activists, and it's time that they should just come out of the closet and admit it. So, in fact, I think the media would benefit a lot and institutionally and rebuild some trust with their that they've lost over the years with their audiences if they just came out of the closet and admitted that they're all a bunch of Democrats.
I agree. Matt Boyle, where can people read your stuff?
Breitbart.com.
Thank you so much for joining us, Matt Boyle. He always has all the information on all things China, on the Bidens, and I love how he has as much disgust for our media as I do. I mean, that just goes to show you I will have him on as many times as he wants because I appreciate people echoing my frustrations. Guys, if you're thinking of replacing your carpets due to pet stains and odors, you got to try Genesis 950. The reviews are amazing. This is one product that actually works. With water, it breaks down the bonds of stains and odors, so they're gone for good. And it can be used in a carpet cleaning machine, and it's green. But my favorite part, speaking of all of this nonsense that's going on right now, my favorite part of this product is that it's made in America. If you're tired of pet cleaners that don't work, it's time to buy Genesis 950. Plus, you get a lot of product. 1 gallon of industrial strength Genesis 950 makes up to 7 gallons of cleaner. But Genesis 950 is not just for pet stains. I don't have any pets, but I like to use it in my bathroom, in the kitchens, floors, grease stains, anything. It works wonders. Guys, order 1 gallon direct at genesis950.com to receive a free spray bottle, free shipping, and a $10 coupon using code GRACE. That's genesis950.com. Coupon only available for 1 gallon purchase. Genesis 950, much cheaper than replacing your carpets. 844-500-4242. We'll open up the lines, and we got a lot of sound to get to. Do not go anywhere on this Wednesday. This is the Grace Curley Show.
Follow Grace on Twitter at @G_Curley.